So let's talk roses and carnations. They are one of my favorite flowers because they're so versatile. They come in very consistent color tones, which I really like, and they're extremely hardy. We sell the Ecuadorian premium roses, so they're not gonna be like the tight bullets that you see at the grocery store. They're gonna blow out, they're gonna get big and fatty, just like the pictures that you've seen us take on our product pages. So I wanna go over what it's like and how to care for them properly, and a few tips of how to get them to open. So first of all, when you get your roses, you're gonna feel like we cheated you. They're packed in layers, and so this is a garden rose. This is the Romantic Antiques, and so you can only see 6, but there's 12 in there. We get so many emails each week, and they're like, well, you sent us our roses and you shorted us, and we didn't short you. It's like huge machines that group and wrap these. And so this is some Freedom Roses, and there's 25 in a bunch, and they're layered in. Okay, and then we got carnations, and they're very similar. They're kind of staggered. They're never wrapped like roses, but they're typically always in a plastic bag. So let me show you how to process these properly. So when you unbox your flowers, never take off the wrapping first. That's the biggest mistake that I see DIY brides make. They get excited, they pull off that cardboard, and it slumps over. When you get your flowers, you can cut off the rubber band, and you can even take off the plastic sleeve. But I want you to keep this cardboard on because these flowers, they've been shipped and they need to rehydrate while they're upright. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut them at an angle. I usually, you can cut 1 to 2 inches off. I typically do around 3, and I snip quickly because I wanna get these in water as quick as possible. I pull off some lower leaves because I don't want those leaves in my water line. All these leaves make the water icky and introduces bacteria. And I'm gonna let these guys soak for an hour before I unwrap them. And I'm gonna do the same for the standard roses. So I usually have a pair of gloves. These don't look exceptionally thorny, but sometimes they really are. And what I do is hold them like you'll hold a baby or a football. And I rip the lower leaves off because I know that I'm not gonna need those. I don't want those in my water line. I just kind of work the bunch around and try to rip those lower leaves off. So violent. And you don't have to make it perfect, but you definitely wanna keep that water clean. And in saying that, I don't put a lot of water in my buckets. I probably have about 3 to 4 inches. Like if you make the water deep, then that's just more chance to get like dirt, leaves, and bacteria in your water. You always want to start with clean, fresh water. Don't put any additives in it. If you get professional floral food from us, go ahead, just make sure that you follow the measurements and the instructions. So one time when I was a new florist, I thought more is better, and I fried my flowers because it was too concentrated. Okay, so these are relatively clean, and now I'm ready to cut them. So I just unpacked them, they were just shipped in, they haven't been processed. So I'm coming in again at an angle, snipping as quickly as possible. The reason why you cut at an angle is that you get more surface area for the flower to take up water. Okay. This is gonna soak for an hour, then we'll take it off. It's good practice all the way around that when you cut your flowers, you let them drink for an hour before you unwrap them, especially when they've been shipped. Now, if you're lucky enough to live in a town that we have a wholesaler, they've probably already been cut and processed, but we don't know that for sure. They could have just received them that morning. So it's just better practice to let them drink while they're supported in their cardboard. You're gonna get so sick of hearing me say that, but I've received too many emails. So carnations, they don't require quite as much care as a rose. I don't worry about stripping these little guys off just because there's so many and I know I really can't kill these, so I'm a little bit lazier with a carnation, if I'm honest. But I always recut things and I always want them to soak. I love carnations because there's nothing here to hurt you. And if you notice, I gave my roses their own bucket, and you're gonna wanna do that, and we'll talk about that later. Carnations can be a little bit more crowded. Okay, we'll let these soak and come back. Okay, these have been soaking for an hour, so I can unwrap them. And these are the garden roses. Expect to be underwhelmed. Don't cry when you unwrap them. They're never impressive right when you get your flowers. And so they're packed, they're closed. They're not gonna look like the website, because the ones on the website, they've been out for a day or two. So with the garden roses, I'm pretty careful with these guys because they're expensive and you always want to give them their own special vase or a shallow bucket. And I do want to say no to Home Depot or Lowe's buckets. They're too deep, they're not conducive for flowers, so go to Walmart instead and get plastic bathroom trash cans. Even though these look dirty on the outside, they've had a lot of love. I've had them for years, but they're very clean on the inside and they're the perfect size. And this is about a 2.5 gallon and this is about a 1.5. This is a cheap Walmart vase for 90 cents. These are fantastic. I don't sell these because you can obviously buy them cheaper at Walmart. So with garden roses, I'm a lot more careful with these because of their price point, and they're not as strong as a standard rose. So it really pains me when people email and they're like, my garden roses aren't looking good and they're just jammed together deep in a bucket. They're not gonna look good if you do that. You gotta treat them like the queens that they are. So I typically, the foliage on roses, it's never attractive. So I typically strip it off, especially on garden roses. For standard roses, I leave it on and I'll tell you why later. But we're just gonna give them their own space. See how these guys aren't crowded? Within a day, and you'll see the shoot because we're doing a shoot later on this week, these are gonna be blown out and beautiful. And one thing I want you to pay attention to is the guard petals. So you're gonna have some fugly petals that surround the base of the rose. And that doesn't mean the rose is bad, it means it's a guard petal that needs to be plucked off. These actually look pretty good. And I don't mind if it looks a little bit older and slightly curled. I think that that's something that I would see in nature, so I appreciate that. Not everybody does. So if something's ugly to you, just pluck it off. And see, there was 12 in here, not 6 like we thought. And I'll show you if we need to hurry and get these guys to open. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Okay, let's process the standard ones. Okay, here's the standard roses. We're gonna pull off this cardboard. We're gonna be underwhelmed. These are looking really good. You've got all this packing. Remember how I said that they were packed in layers? I wasn't lying to you. Here they all are. My husband asked, he's like, can you just clean as you go? I'm like, no, you can't. You make a huge mess and you clean it all up at the end. So this is in its own bucket. I like to keep my roses in their own plastic bathroom trash can because I like it to have all of the space. So then what I'm gonna do is kind of just reposition them. When they're crowded like this, they're not gonna open. If they're touching each other and they're all like smushed together, they're not gonna blow out, which that's a word that I use when I'm referring to something really opening. My goal as a florist is I want everything to open to its fullest capacity for that wedding night. My goal is not to keep these tight and to make them last like a week and a half, 2 weeks like I would for like a Mother's Day arrangement. For a wedding, you want everything to be as open as possible. So in order to do that, we're gonna spread these guys out. We're gonna give them plenty of space. So this is really nice. If you want to clean them like I did these garden roses, you're welcome to. I've gotten to where I just make sure that there isn't any leaves in the water line, because if you remember, it will just cause the water to get gross and compromise your roses. I keep the petals on not because the leaves on, not because they're pretty, but because if I'm building a large scale arrangement, I do like the density of it. So if you can imagine, if I have this huge urn and I've greened it out and I'm backfilling with these roses, you're not gonna see these leaves, and they're not super pretty, they never will be, but it will create more like density, and I want that with a large arrangement. Okay, let's do carnations. Okay, so for carnations, they don't need a lot of special care. You just want clean water. I'll crowd my carnations a bit more. I won't crowd my roses like I've talked ad nauseum, but the carnations, they don't blow out quite like a rose. However, sometimes they come closed, and these are a bit underwhelming because they haven't opened. So you can manually open carnations, which I do all the time, and it's really the only flower that you can manhandle in this way. So they'll fluff out in a day or two, but when I'm designing, so this is one that's more closed, florists call it fluffing out the carnations, and you can just use your thumb to push this guy down. It's not gonna bruise it, even with a white carnation or a blush one. And so we'll do it with this Minerva. We'll just open this up gently with our thumb, or non-gently, because they can handle it. And I usually don't do that until right before I design. Like, this guy is super closed. So for roses, a lot of times when I get them on a Wednesday for a Saturday wedding, I just prep them, do what I just did, and I leave them. And I come back like later that evening or that next morning and I see where they're at. Most of the time, they're gonna just blow out on their own without any assistance. I will say that there's a few varieties like Quicksand, Saharas, Sweet Eskimos, Eskimo roses in general. They just tend to blow out a lot faster. So if you get your roses and you come in a few hours and they're all like big and beautiful, don't panic. That does not mean that they're not gonna last, because we get emails and they're like, these are big and beautiful, but I don't feel like they're gonna last to my wedding date. And they absolutely will. You're just lucky. I love it when they open quickly. A lot of times I'll just put my roses in like a sunny location, not quite in direct sunlight, but I will put them like kind of below a window with brightness. If it's not extremely hot outside and I need to get them to open quickly, I'll put them outside because that wind will help open them. When you get them, I always kind of squeeze the base. These feel pretty good. When they're extremely hard and they're very tight, I'll go ahead and start expediting that opening process because, again, I like them big and fatty. All right, I'll show you how to do that. First of all, you can use the blow dryer, turn the heating element off, and blow into the head of the rose. These aren't like carnations. Don't touch them and use your thumb to open them because you'll bruise and damage your flower. You can manually blow into them. This is super tight because we just unwrapped it, but that will help. But when you have a ton of roses to do, like it's like blowing up a bunch of helium or a bunch of balloons, it's better just to use the blow dryer. Okay, so I've got my blow dryer. I don't mind that it's on high, but you don't want to blast it with a lot of heat. So I just put it on the cool setting. I'll take my hand and kind of support the base of the rose, and I'll show you what they look like after we've blown some air into them. Okay, as you can see, just that little moment of pushing some air into it has already started to open these. It didn't damage it. I feel like blowing that air, getting that oxygen down into the base of the rose is gonna help expedite that opening process. And so, again, it's something that I do on Wednesday if I feel the base of the flower and it feels really hard and tight. If not, I wait till Thursday before I make that decision, but it's not gonna damage them either way. Another trick, is to spin them out. So this is something I don't recommend until like right when you're designing. So right before I pull this into a bouquet is when I would spin it. And if I have to go get last minute flowers and they're really tight and they didn't get those few days to open, spinning is a good technique. So what you do is you turn it upside down and basically you're using centrifugal force to help push this open. The reason why I don't recommend that you do this early is because sometimes I do feel like it can kind of, I don't know, like pull the petals away from the base. So I'm just going back and forth with the stem in the palm of my hand. Make sure you remove those thorns and see how that's already a lot more blown out. One other option is to reflex them. So when I reflex a rose, I like to wait until they're a few days old because the older they are, the softer, the more flexible that they'll be. If you try to reflex a brand new rose, you're probably gonna split the petals and that's probably what's gonna happen to me. So, surprisingly, this is just when you pop them inside out and you're spinning them. I have a good video for this on our YouTube channel with an older blueberry rose. So this freedom, see how I'm splitting that? This is a little bit too fresh. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'll break one for you. And this just gives you more bang for your buck. It makes the rose like double the size. So this is what it's like to reflex the rose. One thing I forgot to mention, you're gonna have some ugly petals and those are called guard petals. I did talk about it with the garden roses, but you're also gonna have it on standard roses. We get a lot of emails of clients panicking because they feel like their roses aren't looking good. So I always ask for them to send me a picture and they'll, shoot a picture and point at the side, and what they're pointing at is the guard petal. So you know that you're always gonna pull off those ugly ones, and you might have to just pull off 2. Sometimes I have to pull off 3 to 5, just depending on the flower. How you know a rose is bad, if it got compromised in transit, which is, it happens, it's rare, but it does happen, is it starts shattering at the base of the rose, so the rose petals start falling off, or you have bruising through the center of the rose. So don't concern yourself for any outside petals. You can just pluck those guys off. I like to save them and put them in the flower girl basket. But if you feel like your roses have been compromised in any way, I want to hear about it immediately. That way we can just send you a replacement or issue a refund. But I want you to gather them together and take a picture looking down at them if you're worried about them. That way I can see if there's any bruising or there's any spotting. Maybe they were rained on right before they were packed up. And in that case, we would want to get you some replacements. So roses and carnations, as you can see, are very easy to take care of. They're pretty hardy, but that gives you a few tips and tricks to get the optimal results and to get the most for your money with these guys.